What's up, everybody, and happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Welcome back to my channel. This is Garrett, and what I want to talk about today is going to be 10 Christmas movies that I recommend. All right, I know this is a little bit late in the game this month to do this, but I just wanted to get it out there really quick. I easily could have went through horror movies and holiday movies, but I tried to pick 10 movies that I personally try to watch every year. Some could be ones that I watched as a kid that I still currently watch. Some could be classics. But if I look at this list right now, there actually is not too many horror Christmas movies in there. So really quick, I can go through a few that I do enjoy, like Silent Night, Deadly Night, Black Christmas. There was a great one that came out a few years ago, Better Watch Out. There's another good one that's kind of under the radar called The Children, which takes place on Christmas or around Christmas, but it's not necessarily about Christmas. So if you haven't seen that one, check it out. There's an awesome one that I do have a DVD-R of called Elves, which I do not think has made its leap to DVD or Blu-ray yet, but that's another cool one to check out. It's straight cheesy 80s with some funny lines from it. I think it came out probably late 80s, maybe early 90s. So again, just a few on the horror front that I could easily get into, but I know that's been done countless times. Like I said, what I wanted to get through today was the ones that I personally like to watch every single year. And I think most of these on this list could pretty much be for anybody. There's a couple on there that would be a little bit more adult rated. But I will get through 10 movies that I think you guys definitely need to check out. Some I'm sure you have, some I'm sure maybe you haven't. So let's get down to that. I will get the list started now. All right, so I'm going to start off with one that I'm pretty sure all of you have seen. It's one of the classics. You can check it out over my shoulder here. And there's a movie poster for Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase. One of the vacation movies. Again, this is one of the classics. I have that poster there signed by Chevy Chase himself. So again, this is definitely one that I've watched since I was a kid, and I still watch every single year to this day. There is not much to say about this. I'm sure you guys have seen this countless times, but again, it definitely makes my list, so that's why I figured I'd put this out there first, because I knew it was one that you guys definitely know. All right, the next one is in that same category. It's pretty much a classic at this point. I remember seeing this movie as a kid in theaters. It might have been its, first day in the theater. It was actually around my birthday that this came out. I'm pretty sure, I feel like this was a birthday present for me, unless it was in the theaters a long time, because my birthday takes place in April, so I don't know, maybe I just have the time frame wrong, but I did see this in theaters. I remember going with my parents, and I'm pretty sure my brother was there too. We went to a pasta restaurant beforehand, and then we went to check this movie out, and it's remained a classic ever since for me, and I'm sure everybody else watching, and that is going to be Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin. Again, I would take this and part two and kind of lump them together. Part one is where it's at. Part two is great. It does take place around Christmas as well. So again, I kind of use those two as a bundle. So if you watch the first one, make sure to check the sequel out. All right, number 3 is definitely a Christmas classic in my opinion. It might be one that, not many people have seen. I'm sure the majority have, but, this may have slipped under the radar for some of you guys, but it's definitely one, once I saw it, it was in my list every single year, and that is going to be Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan growing up and now. Jingle All the Way. Again, what's great about Arnold is he can do comedy, he can do family films, he can do action. So he kind of hits it on all cylinders and makes it work regardless what role he's in. So I'm going to say Jingle All the Way. Basically, this is about the biggest toy going right now, which is a Turbo Man doll, and he waited to the last second to get it for his kid, and it's just his adventures trying to obtain this limited item. So for a collector like myself and some of you guys watching, you kind of know how it feels when something is so limited and you've got to jump on it and try to get it before everybody else. It's tough and it's stressful. So Jingle All the Way, check it out. It also has Sinbad and a great cast in here as well. So if you have not seen this one, make sure to add it to your list. Okay, so in the mix right now, the next one I'm going to talk about, I saw this in the theaters as well when it came out, and pretty much laughed from beginning to end. This is the one movie on my list that I think is definitely one, not for kids, but it's definitely a great movie to watch around Christmas. It's got a lot of laughs in it, and I think it really does its job for a holiday film in, the angle that it kind of took it at. And this is Bad Santa. So again, this was a movie that I remember seeing in theaters, and I loved it at the time. I've seen the sequel, but I don't think it was that great because I don't remember much about it at all. But definitely check this one out. Again, I'm pretty sure most of you may have seen this, but if you haven't, definitely a cool one to check out. But again, not with your kids. Okay, number 5 on the list. Now, the story itself is one that I'm a huge fan of, and I watched this in all aspects: the 1980s version, the cartoon version from Disney, and that is A Christmas Carol. So that story alone, with Scrooge and Bob Cratchit and all that, I love that story. There's so many different versions out there of it. I'm a huge fan of the 1980s one. I'm a huge fan of the Mickey's Christmas Carol. That's the one I watched growing up. I've actually been doing a little bit of research on that movie and trying to find different versions that maybe are pretty damn cool that I have not checked out yet. There's just so many out there. So if you guys have any opinions on that, post it below on the Christmas Carol. Am I missing one that is just really cool? I mean, it's always got a creepy little vibe to it, and that's what I think I like the most about it. So I know there was some, way back in like the 30s, and if you guys have any recommendations on any of those adaptations of that story, let me know down below. But the one I have here was a big one for me as a kid because being a huge fan of Ghostbusters, I could not get enough of Bill Murray. So as a kid, Ghostbusters was one of my favorite movies growing up. The cartoons, I collected the toys. I mean, it was Ghostbusters all the time for a long time. So when this movie came out, again, this has a little bit of an edge to it, so it's not necessarily for kids, but because it had Bill Murray, I was all about it, and I still love it to this day, and that is Scrooged. So again, it's a take on the Christmas Carol, but done in a very, very different way, and I think the way they did it here works. So if you haven't checked this one out, check out Scrooged with Bill Murray. Again, I think this is one that most of you have seen before, but if not, definitely add it to your list this year. All right, number 6. Now, another one that I have to talk about from my childhood. And again, this is kind of a holiday movie that's not necessarily a Christmas movie. It just takes place around Christmas. So again, we talk all the time about things like Die Hard, which I do love, but it just didn't make my list this year because there's other ones either from nostalgia purposes or movies that I just like a lot better. And this kind of falls in the same category where people could argue, is this a Christmas movie or is it not? But again, I was talking about Ghostbusters all the time growing up. Once Ghostbusters was kind of over with at the time, like I was a little bit older, I wasn't really playing with Ghostbusters toys and stuff anymore, but I was moved on to the next thing, and that is Batman Returns. So, Batman with Michael Keaton, I was a huge fan of that. I can remember seeing that in the theater when it came out, and I absolutely loved it. It became all things Batman as far as toys. It was action figures and cards and video games and posters and notebooks and folders. I mean, it was Batman everywhere. And I was a huge fan of that movie growing up. I still am to this day. And when Batman Returns came out, it kind of took the first one and basically went, double time. You had double villains. It was faster paced, and it took place on Christmas. So again, I really love this movie. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that movie, but maybe you don't recall it being around Christmas where this took place. So again, I would definitely add this to your holiday viewing, again, because it's a great movie and because you may have missed all the Christmas references and holiday references that this movie has. All right, Batman Returns, Michael Keaton, check it out. Number 7 on my list is more of a special, a holiday special. growing up, I was a huge fan of this. I can remember watching this on TV, must have been when it aired. We recorded it, and it was one of those holiday specials that we watched continuously every year. Once I started getting really into DVD collecting, I made sure to really find this movie. It was really sought after, and I think it might be sought after still, or it could be out of print. I'm not sure, but that is Peewees Playhouse Christmas Special. So, big Pee Wee Herman fan. Pee-wee's Big Adventure was one of those movies that I was obsessed with growing up as well. That was definitely on rotation all the time. So with that being said, Pee-wee's Playhouse was definitely a Saturday morning go-to. And I can remember when this came out, it just had a bunch of, big names in it. But at the time I was so young, I didn't know a lot of these actors and actresses that were in this special. So I actually kind of have a little bit more fondness for it now, because I do know who a lot of these actresses and actors are that are in this special. But it just had a lot of really memorable scenes and parts in this special. And of course, at the time, Pee Wee Herman was my jam. So I definitely was watching this one a lot as a kid. And if you haven't seen this one, I'm not sure, again, how readily available this is, but try to find it and check it out. And make sure not to eat that yellow snow. All right, number 8 was another movie that was on rotation around this time as a child. So I did see this in theaters and I loved it. It's actually been a couple years since I did add this to my rotation, but it's in there this year and I haven't got to it yet, but I'm looking forward to checking it out again. It's probably been about 2 years since I've watched it. It may have a Blu-ray release, and that's probably why I didn't watch it, because I was waiting for an upgrade. Maybe it just passed me by, but I do have the DVD, and this is Ernest Saves Christmas. So I saw this in theaters, and I absolutely loved it growing up. So as you kind of see with the movies that I'm showing now, you kind of get a good idea of the era that I grew up in with Pee-wee and Ernest and Batman and Ghostbusters, right? So there was so much cool stuff back then. And this is one of those movies that I feel like does such a great job capturing, that Christmas spirit and that Christmas vibe and just taking a different approach towards it. And in my opinion, this is my favorite Ernest movie. I think followed by probably Ernest Goes to Jail at number 2. But when these things were hitting theaters as a kid, I was definitely checking these out for sure. So if you haven't seen this in a while, or maybe you hadn't seen it at all, Ernest Saves Christmas is definitely one that you guys need to add to your list this year. Okay, we have 2 more in the mix. One is my absolute favorite on the list, and the other is probably the one on the list that I think gets least talked about, especially being a Christmas movie that I absolutely love. And I'm hoping at least with this title and in this video, you guys can take away and say, you know what, I haven't checked this out, and I might as well, because it is something that I have added to my holiday viewing list since I saw it in theaters. Let's start with my favorite out of this list first. It's one that everybody knows. It could be considered horror. It can be considered comedy. I look at it as a horror/Christmas movie, and that is Gremlins. So this is my favorite out of everything I've talked about today. Gremlins is number 1. The vibe, Christmas vibe is there. It's got that element of horror in there. It's got that element of comedy in there. It's just overall such a great movie. As you can see here, I've got my Christmas Gizmo shirt on. A huge Gremlins fan. One of my top 10 movies of all time, especially as a kid. This was definitely in rotation of not just holiday movies, but it was rotation all the time. I must have rented this tape, I don't know, dozens of times. I never owned the VHS as a kid, but I rented this quite a bit. So Gremlins, this is the 4K limited edition steelbook from Best Buy. This is an awesome edition, so if you have not checked this out on 4K, I definitely would. Again, this is Gremlins. I am sure you've all seen this movie countless times, but I just had to put it out there because out of everything on this list, this is my absolute favorite title, and I think it does a real good job capturing, Christmas. There's that one scene with Kate talking about her dad on Christmas that still haunts me to this day. Such a crazy, sad, messed up story. And what I love about it is some of the music that they play in this. Every time I hear it now, those classic Christmas music, I always think about this movie. So as much as those songs are super classic, when I hear them, the first thing I think about is Gremlins. So if you're not adding this to your Christmas watching list, or maybe it's been a while since you've seen it, I would definitely check this out. Is it for kids? Sure, I guess so. Could they be freaked out? Yeah, they could be, but I was watching this at a really young age, and it's definitely one of my favorites. All right, I'm on to my 10th pick on this list. And the reason I saved this one for last, like I said, is because out of all 10 films that I talked about today, this is the one that I feel like gets talked about the least. And I love this film. So it's not necessarily a Christmas movie. It takes place on Christmas and there's a lot of Christmas elements to it. But I definitely think this should be added to a classic around this time. And this is Just Friends with Ryan Reynolds and Amy Smart. This movie is awesome. This is one of those movies that I could watch anytime and still laugh. There's a lot of elements to this that between him and his little brother that I can really relate to with my little brother and the way they kind of bicker and fight back and forth. And it's even funnier now because they're more or less like Ryan Reynolds is older now too. So it's just funny to see them acting like they're, teenagers again and younger, fighting back and forth. But if you have not checked this out, because again, just looking at this cover and the title, you might be like, oh, this is a chick flick. I don't want to watch this, a romantic comedy. Guys, this is hilarious. It is a great film. It's basically about Ryan Reynolds. He was in love with Amy Smart's character growing up in high school. Amy Smart was like the popular girl in school. Everybody had a crush on her. And at the time, Ryan Reynolds was a very heavy, nerdy kid that was her best friend, but he always wanted to be more, but she never wanted to look at him that way because she just wasn't physically attracted to him. She mentally was attracted to him and was his best friend, but he could never get out of that friend zone. And he was teased quite a bit. I think it was the last day of high school, and they had a big party, and he was just really, really embarrassed by his class and with Amy Smart. And he left that party and basically left town, went to Hollywood, became something of himself, lost a bunch of weight, and he came back to town for Christmas and met up with Amy Smart's character again. But this is the new Ryan Reynolds, not the same kid that he was in high school. This is 10 years later. I think it was around high school reunion. And man, it is hilarious. You guys definitely need to check this one out. I highly recommend it. It is on my list every single year and beyond. And it's got a lot of great one-liners in this as well. So if you have not checked this one out, I definitely recommend Just Friends. All right, gang, so that's my list of 10 movies you should definitely check out this year around the holiday season. Again, I'm a little late to the party. Actually, I have to give credit to Rhine1988, Justin Rhine, for posting his video under the similar concept. He went into horror movies and non-horror movies. Now, again, I tried my best not to add a lot of the classics in there, like Christmas Story and all that, but there was some classic movies that I just could not pass up because they are a staple in my list every year. So before I end, I just want to give 2 more recommendations, which I'm going to call a little bit of a bonus or my honorable mentions. Now, the reason these didn't get put on my list is because I do not own these on DVD or Blu-ray. I don't even think these have a DVD or Blu-ray, and if they do, it's been long out of print. Now, both of these I had owned on VHS growing up, and the first one I want to talk about is a movie that I saw at a very, very young age on TV. Now, I know there's been a lot of adaptations of this story. This was a very 80s adaptation, and it was to a point where I thought for years I almost dreamt this movie until I found it on VHS at like a video store that was going out of business. Now, this movie is Babes in Toyland, and it has an all-star cast of Keanu Reeves, Drew Barrymore, even Pat Morita is in there, plus many other big names that you remember from the 80s and 90s. Now again, I had watched it so many times as a kid that I almost felt like it was a dream to me. The villain was Barnaby, and he was living inside a bowling ball. And I had recently just discovered that this movie is on, I believe, Amazon Prime. Now, I have not gone back and watched it yet because I'm almost afraid that it's going to ruin the nostalgia that I have about this movie. But I just remember it being so off the wall and bonkers back then, and it just kind of almost creeped me out in a way. So growing up, seeing Babes in Toyland and all the other adaptations of this movie, I always kind of thought the one that I dreamt didn't exist. So I would definitely go check that out. That is on my list this year to rewatch, is that Babes in Toyland with Keanu Reeves. And like I said, I've been recently told that that is on streaming, and I'm almost positive it's Amazon Prime. So check that out if you haven't. It's a super 80s take on the classic story. The second one I'm going to talk about here is Muppets Family Christmas. This was one that I watched as a kid growing up. I had it on VHS. I had recorded it off TV. But for some reason, it's just very hard to come by now. I think it's on YouTube, I believe you can watch it. But it's one of those movies that every time I try to tell people about it, they always ask me if I'm talking about a different Muppets Christmas. And it's not that one. I'm pretty sure this is Muppets Family Christmas, I believe. If I am wrong on that title, please put it down below. I could be mixing it up. But I know it's just very hard to find. And what I always remembered about it was it just had cast from, like, I believe Sesame Street as well. And it was really cool because then there was Fraggle Rock made an appearance. So you had a lot of cameos from these other shows where back then was just not normal. Super fun movie. They're all locked in a house around Christmas. And I can just remember just a boatload of characters from all different shows being locked inside this house during a snowstorm. Again, it's been years since I've seen this, but I have recently brought it up to people that it seems like not many people remember this at all. So I checked it out. It's on YouTube. I have not rewatched it yet, but I definitely am going to, just to kind of bring that nostalgia back. So I wanted to add these on the list just because they are a little bit off the wall and they are very hard to come by. So if you guys know anything about these or you have them or remember them, please post down below and let me know that, hey, you're not the only ones who remember these movies and I found it on YouTube or found it on Amazon Prime and I'm checking it out this year. So again, those two honorable mentions are Babes in Toyland from the 80s. I think it was a made-for-TV movie, and I'm pretty sure it's Muppets Family Christmas. Thank you guys so much for checking it out. If you like my videos, please put a like down below. If there's anything that maybe you think I should check out that I do not have on my list, regardless if I've seen it or not, please post in the comments below. Give me feedback on any of these movies that I listed here. And like I said, if you check out the beginning of this video, I do list off a couple of horror-related holiday movies that you guys should check out if you haven't. But again, I know that's been done a bunch of times, and I wanted to kind of give you a list of something a little bit different. All right, gang, I will see you guys soon. Have a great holiday, Merry Christmas, and stay